Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, the show with my team of comedians who will review the newspapers for you. Tonight we have Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse. But before we start doing the heavy lifting, let's get the latest news.
Good evening, I'm Olivia Guthrie. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says he's sorry to receive the resignations of Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid. Boris Johnson's close allies both quit in the wake of the Chris Pincher scandal. Their announcements came minutes after the Prime Minister apologised for hiring the MP as Deputy Chief Tory Whip, despite being made aware of complaints against him of inappropriate behaviour. Several private secretaries have also handed in their resignations. Sajid Javid was the first to resign, posting his resignation letter to Boris Johnson online. It says the country needs a strong and principled Conservative party, and the party is bigger than any one individual. I served you loyally and as a friend, but we all serve the country first. When made to choose between those loyalties, there can only be one answer.
Hello, Mr. Javid. How do ITV?
Hello.
How do you feel
Good
about
evening.
your
I'm just going to go and spend some time with my family. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Later, as he returned home, the former Health
evening.
Secretary
Thank you.
refused to answer any questions from reporters. Rishi Sunak resigned just minutes after his former colleague. In his resignation letter, he told Boris Johnson the public rightly expect government to be conducted properly, competently and seriously. I recognise this may be my last ministerial job, but I believe these standards are worth fighting for, and that is why I am resigning. The Prime Minister did not engage with reporters as he returned to 10 Downing Street this evening after learning of the resignations of those allies. A mini cabinet reshuffle quickly got underway. Steve Barclay is replacing Sajid Javid as Health Secretary. He's already pledged to beat the COVID backlogs. Nadeem Zahawi has been appointed as the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Universities Minister Michelle Dolan will replace him as Education Secretary. Well, the resignations come just weeks after a damaging confidence vote in the Prime Minister, which saw 41% of his own MPs withdraw their support. A warning, if you're watching us on television, the following footage contains flashing images. By-election defeats in Tiverton and Honiton and Wakefield followed, and the resignation of Tory party chairman Oliver Dowden. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he would support a general election if one were called.
After all the sleaze and all the failure, it's clear that this Tory government is now collapsing. And Tory cabinet ministers have been cheerleaders for Johnson throughout this sorry saga. They backed him when he broke the law. They backed him when he lied. They backed him when he mocked the sacrifices of the British people. So they have been complicit as he has disgraced his office and let down his country. And frankly, if they had a shred of integrity, they would have gone months ago.
TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners with me, Stephen Allen. Tonight's panel for this special Olympus Has Fallen episode are the comedy legends of Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse, making his Headliners debut. So I'll start by saying, Josh, I mean, you've done a fair few of these. You've done like 3 weeks' worth in the last week, probably. Any advice to give a newbie?
Grow your hair a little bit on the sides, just to fit in with us, if you want to do that. Welcome, Roger.
Hello.
Very nice. People
to be
don't know
here.
Roger. Brilliant stand-up. We are honoured to have your presence here. Thank you for coming along.
Delighted to be here, of course, if only a little disappointed not to have been called into the cabinet this evening.
I know.
There's still time.
There is still time,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You could resign. You could be on and resign straight away. This will be the quickest appearance ever.
It's early yet.
Well, let's start off by taking a look at the front pages for tomorrow. We start with the Daily Mail. You will spot a theme in the front pages, to be honest, but they go with, can even Boris, the greased piglet, wriggle out of this? That's the nickname that he was given by David Cameron, and that man knows his pigs. The Daily Telegraph, Johnson hanging by a thread as Sunak and Javid walk out. Prime Minister scrambles to shore up his cabinet after a wave of resignations, but insists he will carry on as leader. The Guardian goes with PM on the brink after Javid and Sunak quit. A day of apologies, shoring up support, then the letters arrive. Clearly not a story about Royal Mail. Financial Times has Johnson on brink as ministers quit. Then we go to the Times with Johnson on the brink. You see what I mean about spotting that pattern? Prime Minister rocked as Chancellor and Health Secretary quit. Sunak, I've been loyal, but we cannot continue like this. The Sun says Boris on the brink as Rishi and Saj quit. Last chance saloon is their way of summing it up. The Metro sums it up interestingly. Ministers in a pincher movement going 6:02 p.m. Sajid Javid quits. Going 6:11 p.m. Rishi Sunak quits. Gone? ? PM is still clinging on to power. And the Daily Star even goes with the same story, which means that I guess there's no alien news today. Cabinet ministers desert Pinocchio, curtains for Bozo. And that's your front pages. Let's start off with Wednesday's Telegraph. Boris's cabinet's folding like he got it from IKEA, Roger.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the big one. This is the felling of the big dog. It had to end sometime, if indeed it's going to end now. It's impossible to say, isn't it, yet, because he is, as you've said, the greased piglet. And it was always going to be messy when it did end. Of course, it's inevitable that that's the case. It's been a fabulous roller coaster ride, and maybe he's been caught fibbing one final time. But this evening, of course, it's been covered by the news already. He released his filmed clip for the 6 p.m. news. It was a mistake, and I apologise. I presume he's got several of these in a cabinet waiting to release at any time. An unusually deflated Prime Minister finally said sorry over his handling of the Chris Pincher scandal. But then his thunder was stolen completely by Rishi Sunak and also, of course, Sajid Javid, I do apologise, Sajid Javid, who stole Rishi Sunak's thunder, actually, by nipping in just ahead of him. And that's left two big vacancies, two big dogs outside of the cabinet. How long can it possibly last? It's impossible to say, isn't it, really?
Well, the thing is, I mean, this story, if this were about any other Prime Minister, all the newspapers would probably be right in saying, well, this is going to be it. But these are different times. This is the Boris Johnson show. I mean, the newspapers are bound to go with, this is the end, but they'll do that every single front page to try and sell more copies. Is this likely to be the end, Josh?
Well, at some point he will run out of people in government, so possibly so. I mean, I don't see how he can really... And I've always seen him as almost invincible, seemingly just from evidence. But I like how the Telegraph has written this. They said he was left staggering about, like, Rocky in his final fight, and then the next sentence is he's on the brink of being booted out. And it's like, mate, don't mix your metaphors here. Like, punched out, whatever, don't do it. But he's now turned to replace now as his who was his chief of staff, but now I believe he's replacing Sunak, is ultra loyalist Steve Barclay, and I think that's very brave. Going with the whole Northern Irish thing is a good. Did I read that right? Did they mean it? Have I got the context wrong?
Probably.
It's not an ultra loyal.
No.
That way. OK, so someone who's loyal.
They've found someone who's loyal to Boris Johnson.
I don't really know that much about politics, to be fair.
Then you're on the right show.
OK, good.
Loads of the cabinet have come out and declared their loyalty, but then, of course, they'll be the ones who are waiting for the stalking horse to do the damage before they run successly for the leadership.
You know your
of course.
politics.
You never know quite what the machinations are, do you? Yeah. It's never the one who wields the knife who becomes...
And Liz Truss is very... sort of having these champagnes with Liz or whatever she calls it. She's obviously angling for it. So, yeah.
She's absolutely a front runner. Yes, she's been courting the Tory party for a long, long time, of course. And Boris has only desperately at the last minute started trying to woo his own MPs by touring the tea room earlier today, hilariously. I presume he'll be making another surprise visit to Kyiv over the next 24 hours as well.
Doing another Brexit.
Wow.
You know, I was overhearing someone on the train, because this is what I do when I'm on trains, I'm not to be trusted, and they were saying, is this going to be a general election? Now, this is not the way that it should pan out, but actually, would that be a stroke of genius? If there's one thing Boris seems to be known for, it's winning elections. If the one thing the Conservative Party would like is to win elections, should he just go to the public, get that mandate
It would be a
refreshed?
fabulous way to front down his own party, potentially, because, of course, he's not going to go quietly. All the pundits have said he's not going to go quietly. It was wittily suggested earlier today on the news that if a loyal aide walked in with a bottle of whiskey and a loaded revolver, he would shoot the aide and drink the bottle of whiskey. He might well front down his own party and go to the polls, and of course only then would he perhaps, and even then perhaps not, be removed from number 10.
Yeah, well, essentially, Keir Starmer says that he wants election, or he'd be up for it, but I wonder if they really are. I don't think they're really ready yet. He's done a lot of work, but I don't think the Labour Party's there yet, necessarily.
The Labour Party aren't as far ahead as they really should be, given how much chaos has been emanating from number 10. Given the chaos that the government is in, it's preposterous, really, that the official opposition isn't many more points ahead in the polls than they actually are.
And I think they wouldn't mind him staying or someone else coming in who's a bit rubbish and seeing how that goes before to get that sort of point lead going on. So,
like Trump, of course, Boris is the ultimate campaigner, so it wouldn't be a bad final throw of the dice. Perhaps that is
how
the way
many
it will happen.
lies have there been? How could anybody take anything that he says on the campaign trail like it would actually happen?
Yeah, but it'd be fun on this show, wouldn't it?
That'd be great. Come on, Boris, stick around.
The whole few years have been terrific fun. We'll miss him dearly when he's gone, because it's been chaotic and it's been glorious and it's been hilarious. And it's delightful always, even now, to see how apoplectic people who aren't fans of Boris Johnson get at the mere mention of his name. They froth at the mouth and they can't understand why he has stood like a colossus in many ways over politics over the last 2 years, because so few other people, Keir Starmer being an example, has anything like his charisma.
That's what I was going to say, charisma, there it is.
Yeah, in the land of no personality, the man with half a personality is king. Something like that.
Well, he will be for a little while longer. We'll see how long.
Tomorrow's Mirror now, and of all the times to not have a health minister, this might be a tricky one, right, Josh?
Yeah, so this is quite interesting, but supposedly numbers now of people with dying of COVID are higher than last summer. So that is, I knew that just anecdotally, a lot of people I know seem to have COVID at the moment or are having it. That's why I have been on so much recently. Just covering it.
That's why I'm here.
Covering everybody else.
But I mean, as a replacement host, I can't judge you for being... I'm the bus replacement service of TV people.
Josh, are you free? Will it get me out of my house with my 5 kids doing dinner? Yes, I'm free, very much so. But then it's funny because I've sort of missed these numbers. You know, they used to, every day there would be like the updates of all the numbers. So this whole article in the Mirror is all about all the different numbers. And I realised, because I would just get angrier and angrier during COVID, because the way that they would say, you know, people with COVID or people dying with COVID as their figure, as opposed to people who've dying of COVID, and it would just get me more and more upset. But the figures here are definitely indicative of something going on. In the 4 weeks to June 24th this year, COVID was mentioned on 1,000 death certificates compared to 383 last year. So even whether the criteria of with COVID, the fact is more people are dying.
I suppose that's a good point, yeah. Even if these are with ones, people will say, like, oh, if you have COVID and fall off a ladder and die, you'd be counted as a death with COVID. Yeah. Why are more people falling off ladders than this summer, would be the question. If there's an increase, what's behind the increase?
Well, can I chip in here and point out a couple of things? As I recall, last summer we were between waves, weren't we? And I think I'm right in saying that the vaccination programme had just kicked in this time last year. Yeah. So the fact that deaths are now slightly worse than they were exactly a year ago shouldn't entirely cloud your vision, and you have to acknowledge that deaths this year are massively down on last year. Yeah. So it's all about waves, isn't it? And it's very, very... It's an impossible tsunami of statistics. It's always been...
Another weird one is that
impossible to follow.
The numbers are up from even pre-COVID. Deaths are up even more then. So they're saying, be careful. It's like, don't just be careful COVID stuff. Be careful going up the ladder or doing any of it.
Arguably, you can only measure it by excess deaths, and even then it's excess deaths over a longer period than this. It's not, 1 month compared to this time last year. It's got to be over a sequence of years. And there is an argument that one of the consequences of lockdown is that more people are dying of undetected cancers, various other conditions which weren't diagnosed because the whole health service was frozen. For
Welcome to GB News. So,
Just being told you made a great start. Look at that. Moving on now with leadership elections, COVID on the increase, and now Wednesday's Guardian with the story of masks making a comeback. It's just like early 2020 all over again, Roger.
It's the same story, really, on a run. This is from The Guardian, which is, of course, a long-standing cheerleader of lockdown and, indeed, governmental meddling in the intricacies and minutiae of all our lives. But this, reasonably enough, reports that Professor Andrew Pollard, who is the chair of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, has suggested it would be sensible for hospitals to reintroduce mandatory mask wearing. That doesn't seem too controversial, frankly, to me, given that hospitals are magnets for vulnerable people. And, of course, there is a proven minor prophylactic value to wearing masks. It seems a fairly straightforward and uncontroversial measure.
yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is in hospitals is how much better they are at treating people with COVID and how many deaths there are once you do get into hospital.
Absolutely.
There's also, thinking about your whole sort of wave thing, I don't want to be, but maybe it's a slightly good thing. Get the wave out of the way now before winter.
Oh, yeah?
Putting it out there.
Well,
then
also,
it's
it's a
unpredictable,
while, isn't it? It's a while since we all had our boosters. So the efficacy of the booster programme is presumably waning, and the latest variants are fairly mild. They're not typically killing people. 1 in 30 people, supposedly, has COVID at the moment in the UK. We've all had it statistically 2 or 3 times in all probability. That's a bad time for a nervous cough.
I've had it about 6 times, I think. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure I've had it once, but I can't be absolutely sure. But apparently with COVID, this is one of the dangerous and interesting things about it. Unlike flu, you can catch it several times over a relatively short period of time. And every time you catch it, there is a statistical small chance of you walking away with the symptoms of long COVID, and no one wants that, obviously. I heard a documentary on Radio 4 about the victims of long COVID, and they'd all been left with tragically thin, whiny voices.
Wednesday's Telegraph with more details of the July the 4th shooting, Josh.
Yes, so obviously it sort of happened, day or two ago, but now finally we're finding out who did it, and it was a rapper, or it wasn't really a rapper, an aspiring rapper called Robert Bobby Crimo III. But I think, or his stage name, Awake the Rapper. But yeah, they found a bunch of videos online. He had a YouTube channel filled with mass shootings and violence. Of course, it was with a high-powered, unnecessary rifle that, of course, they will not make illegal, even though they kill lots of people. But whatever, America, have your fun, or whatever you want to call it, the madness there. And he's a Trump supporter. I don't know what you want to look into that. I don't want to get loads of tweets from Trump supporters going, stop attacking us. But he attended a Trump rally dressed as Where's Wally, or dressed as Waldo, actually, from Where's Wally. And they had to explain that for any older readers. Also, earlier on, they said that he had a video containing referencing Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated President FJ, for any younger viewers. So it's nice that the Telegraph is trying to cover all the bases by explaining all these various references. But to whether, basically he sounds like he wore a jumper in a photo which had this. I don't know if you heard this Pepe the Frog. That's the whole story. So that is used, and they say here, a popular symbol amongst alt-right groups, but it's not. It's a popular symbol amongst neo-Nazi far-right groups. I don't know why they've changed it to alt-right. Why not just say far-right? Also, he had his nickname on some server was SS or whatever. So it sounds like he was a big old racist, and he's killed a bunch of people and injured many more. I think 6 people killed, 36 injured.
There's only one solution to this, isn't it? And it seems obvious from this side of the Atlantic, and that is that you shouldn't give assault rifles to your disturbed kids.
And Yeah, and also the uncle did the old, there was no sign. There was no signs that I saw that would make him do this. He's a quiet kid. He's usually on his own. He's a lonely, quiet person. Might I suggest that that's the sign?
Yes, yes,
But no,
absolutely.
as someone, I'm an introvert. I've done the tests online. I'm an introvert. Let's not tar us all with the same brush. Just because I'm a bit of a quiet loner doesn't mean at some point I'm going to go on a rampage. Doesn't mean I'm not, but it does mean I am.
And across America, there were hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of emos, disturbed teenage kids who won't go on to do anything like this. Similarly, in this country, you know, a tiny minority of psychopaths goes on to be a serial killer. The vast majority, of course, lead ordinary, relatively decent lives.
Successful lives in the government. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, in comedy.
In comedy as well. I mean, we should point out, at the moment, he's not been found guilty, he's just been arrested for this, but we will continue to follow the details of this case. I'm sure this story will keep coming back. Wednesday's Independent, Just Stop Oil won't stop using glue, Roger.
Oh, this is a more fun story. This is the story of the five campaigners from the group Just Stop Oil, who glued their hands to the frame of a copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, a copy attributed to one of the artist's pupils, Giampietrino.
You all right?
Perfect.
How wise not to attempt the accent.
Giampietrino.
What's happened? Have I pressed the button and we're now doing this in a different language?
5 of them lined up with their hands stuck to the frame of a relatively minor work of art. There seems like an obvious solution to this. Just leave them there, couldn't you? Really? That would test their resolve and their dedication.
They're not like being stuck to a road. They'd just walk out with a painting, wouldn't they? This could be the best heist film ever.
Well, you say that, and this is what really made me laugh was because it says, within minutes, half a dozen security... Within minutes of this Last Supper picture. How rubbish...
How cherished it was.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's do a heist, because it sounds like the easiest place to rob in the world.
But they're not stopping traffic, are they? They're not causing a public disturbance, so leave them there, and potentially within a few weeks, you know, it could be some sort of modern British artist stroke Renaissance mashup, couldn't it, really? You could have the rotting corpses of protesters lined up. OK, I've gone too far there. I can see that.
It is weird to try and hit us in the museums. I'm not sure people get... Because, you know, when the stories were impacting M25 drivers, who use the M25 every day, I'd get angry. And then you hear the story protesting museums, like, oh, no, that's terrible.
It makes sense if the sponsors of the museum are perhaps
like
big
BP,
oil.
I think, used to sponsor the Royal...
Sure.
But no, they're saying their whole reasoning is because they want to raise awareness within the art world. Whatever, it's annoying, and also like you saw those videos of people like protesting in the street and stuff, and there were people like in vans getting out and just picking the people up and pushing them aside. You're not going to get that in the art gallery. They're going to be like, this is an interesting interpretation of the Last Supper thing.
Today's protest followed a similar protest yesterday, where in front of the Haywain, 2 protesters once again stuck their hands to the frame. They were later named, because today's protesters haven't been named yet, but these 2 were named as music student Eben Lazarus, 22, and psychology student Hannah Hunt, 23, both of Brighton. Goes back to my original point. They wouldn't get missed, would they?
But you know what they did is they put up pictures on the actual picture, and that is when you start actually possibly damaging the art.
Vandalism.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, I hope that they used like blue tack, but not the fake blue tack, like the good blue tack, the branded blue tack. Otherwise, there could be some real damage.
Yeah, absolute mess.
Are you hoping to gain from your endorsement of the real blue tack?
Sponsored. Well, this is why I'm wearing this blue shirt this evening, actually. It's my blue tack shirt.
Well, coming up after the break, the shocking price of Lurpak, the shocking things kids are learning in sex education, and the shocking way to get a job with no CV.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Stephen Allen, Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse. And between the three of us, the amount of powder we needed for these foreheads, we will bankrupt this place. Wednesday's Times. And I learned this the old-fashioned way. I had two rabbits growing up, so my expectations were all wrong. But sex education is back in the news, Josh.
Yes. So horrendous sex education lessons are going to be investigated by the Children's Commissioner. And actually, you say back in the news, but there have been these kind of reports that have been trickling out over the last few months of some ridiculous things that have been coming out in these school sex education lessons of and it seems like the problem is a lot of this has been like outsourced because the schools aren't exactly sure on what it is they're supposed to teach, or it's not been formatted the right way. They've been sort of outsourcing it to these providers, and these providers, some of them, it turns out, are incredibly inappropriate. They're pushing ideology, certainly something like gender ideology. Some of them are like linking to, like, one of them linked to a porn site through their material. So they really need to get on top of it. I just learnt that RSE means, I thought it meant religious studies. So I didn't know that RSC, did you know that was sex studies?
I had to work it out. It's relationship and sexual education.
Is that what it is? My son got an A in RSC. I was like, oh, he's doing really well studying the scriptures, studying the Bible.
Shouting,
or whatever.
Oh, God.
But it turns out it wasn't that at all. So it is good that they're looking into it. I find it slightly ridiculous that it's taken so long to get to this point. Some of the examples are disturbing. There's a 9-year-old supposedly came home shaking because they'd been taught about rape. There'd been a distraught 6-year-old who'd been taught about masturbation. This is utterly inappropriate. How it has got so far and for so long blows my mind.
What's the right way of doing it, though? This is the impossible.
Well, they need to format. They obviously need to give very precise indicators of what is meant to be taught and the ages that are meant to be taught, and do studies into it and do it, and not just sort of leave it up to some, we can just hire in this company that we don't know really anything about and what they're pushing during these lessons.
Yes, I'm not comfortable with outsourcing. Certainly that seems wrong, fundamentally wrong. My daughter's 14 and all sex education, however gently and appropriately handled, is horrendous as far as she's concerned, because, of course, at that age it is. But nonetheless, it's important, I think, passionately, that the authorities do tackle it, because, of course, you can't rely upon parents to tackle it appropriately. And I sincerely hope that it's far, far better than anything I received in the way of sex education, which was simply antediluvian and non-existent.
Is that how your father explained it to you? What you do is you take your antediluvian and you take their diluvian,
get it done,
from my parents. It was a different age.
But we are agreed that some should be done. I mean, there's especially online conversation where almost it's about not having sex education. It should be done. The problem with outsourcing is it outsources blame. So, if it's taught wrong, it's not our fault, it's the people we brought in.
Absolutely, you put your finger on it.
But I think it's the headmasters, headmistresses, whatever. I think it's their fault for not properly checking out what these companies are saying during the lessons.
Sure.
Well, Wednesday's Guardian, and if you're off to university, less chance of getting a first, but the same chance of getting into debt. Good news, Roger.
Yes, great news. This is, I suspect this is a non-story, actually. This is The Guardian, and it's a story about universities declaring that they are going to stop grade inflation and cut back the awarding of firsts and 2-1s by perhaps 25% to pre-pandemic levels. You see, the proof's in the pudding. I suspect it will never happen because the sad truth is that education is now a competitive resource and universities, the institutions, are competing for trade, and it's perfectly rational, perfectly reasonable that students will go to the universities where they are more likely to get a first or a 2-1. That's what's happened over the last couple of decades, and I don't see how that's going to be reversed just by making a statement saying that it should happen.
Well, it was accelerated, but I didn't know these figures. 38% of undergraduates
Startling.
last year, in 2021, 38% were awarded a first, and that's more than double the 16% that was 10 years ago. So that's 29% just for. But like you say, so this grade inflation thing was happening pre-pandemic. It went from 16 to 29%. And I'm sure that coincided exactly like you said with people now paying, getting into debt to some cases hundreds of thousands pounds of money. But still, to 38% of everybody getting a first. And I feel
devalues the degree to such a degree.
It's ridiculous. And the people I feel sorry for, 18, 19-year-olds, of course, this was their year. They graduate from school. They're into university. And then suddenly everything's shut down. And now they're going to be told, oh, by the way, not only that happened, but by the time you get to grad, your degree is probably going to be less than someone who kind of went through it. So
I think an entire generation has been fleeced. I think it's entirely wrong, disgusting. I haven't got any answers, sadly, but I think an entire generation has been defrauded of a large amount of money. Yeah. And so often now as well, with so many degrees being, frankly, of little value, the best degrees still get you the higher life expectancy and indeed the higher earning potential. But so many Mickey Mouse degrees are now given out and people walk away with these qualifications and gain no benefit. I think if I was...
well, I did get on GBNews, so to be fair...
if I was advising
a little bit.
An 18-year-old, I would tell them to seriously consider whether they should perhaps go straight into business, commerce or learn a trade rather than investing an obscene amount of money in a degree that potentially doesn't.
That's why I tell my kids do something, find the passion that you like.
Extrapolate that forwards. If we follow these figures, give it another 20 or 30 years, everyone not only will have a first, they'll also have a doctorate, and you'll have one person who went, oh, I didn't go and do this. It'll be like life will be like that scene in Spies Like Us where the doctors meet the other doctors. This is why you don't need to worry about the Mr. and Mrs. titles anymore. Everyone's going to be a doctor in the future.
That would be wonderful, of course, if the education was of the quality that you're assuming that implies. But tragically, it's
never going to get
devalued.
Spies Like Us reference in any other TV.
That's true.
Well done, mate.
Yeah. Someone collapses on a plane. Is there a doctor on this plane? Sadly, all of them. Wednesday's Daily Mail. Good news for underqualified people wanting to get a new job. Insert Boris Johnson joke here, Josh.
So this is job shortage, particularly in hotels. And now they're just giving the job to anybody who essentially turns up. You don't need your CV. You don't need any experience. They're so desperate. And I was reading this and I was getting all ready to do my old... see what happens, Brexit, blah, hey. Oh, then it turns out it's actually about Spain and Portugal and the hospitality industry there, which is suffering. They admit themselves they've just been underpaying their staff for a long time.
Absolutely.
And finally it's caught up with them. And certainly during lockdown, where a lot of these people, they just basically fired a bunch of people and said, see you later. Then those people went off and found other jobs, went, hey, wait a minute, I'm actually getting paid much better and treated better and doing a better job. They're not going back to those jobs anymore. So now... these hotels are kind of messed up. And if you've booked your summer holiday in one of those places and in a hotel, you might find yourself ringing down for help or anything and not getting anything because they're closing bars during the week. They're closing certain days.
It will be messy in the short term. But I've got to say, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with giving a job to someone without experience and qualifications because actually that's basically what an apprenticeship is, isn't it? Most importantly, though, once again, you put your finger on something there saying that they simply haven't been investing, they haven't been paying enough. And this, it goes into Brexit, doesn't it? The only way out of it is to invest in a high-wage economy whereby We pay more for the product, but we value the people who are delivering it to us.
Yes, so there we go. So that is your option. It's a good news if your workers to get higher jobs, but then it's going to be bad news for people because they're going to put up the price of hotels and whatnot.
And it's going to be a uniquely bad news place in between, because that's a long-term solution.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It gets
meanwhile,
messy, no
the
doubt.
service you got to get is going to be terrible.
Oh,
someone who
appalling.
couldn't even write a CV turns up. I mean, obviously, they will have a first from a university, but they will give you some terrible help.
But we've been benefiting for such a long time within the EU, of course, by getting served our coffee, for instance, by people who've got PhDs in languages and all... We've got rocket scientists coming to sweep our streets, and it's preposterous.
But they do a great job.
They do a wonderful job.
But they're really, but also,
They serve a great latte.
These new recruits, though, they're going to get 6 hours of training and learn on the job, and that sounds like that's how it works.
Yeah,
good for them.
Wednesday's Telegraph. I can't believe it's only butter, right?
Well, this is the news, which is hardly news, is it? Butter's gone up.
This is huge news.
Butter's gone up.
This is big news.
This is Lurpak, which is apparently hitting £9 a pack. Now, let's read the detail here. It's £9 for a kilogram. That works out £2.25 for a standard butter pack. That's not so remarkable. I think we all know that butter's gone up that much or to that price. But supposedly, some Asda stores are needing to security tag their Lurpak. It is nice. In the same way that they've previously been putting security tags on their electrical goods and such like. It's very hard to imagine, frankly, a skaghead going into Asda and thieving the Lurpak to resell. I don't really see that that's ever going to
melt as they're running away.
So in their sweaty palms.
But I love this idea of the resale, because I noticed, this was in Marks & Spencer, so all of a sudden I look posh, but they put the security tags on prawns. Same thing. Who's turning up to a pub later going, hey, do you want to buy some prawns that I've not refrigerated for 5 hours?
Absolutely.
There's no resale value, is there?
Yeah, Lurpak's always been £9 a kilogram in Marks & Spencer, hasn't it?
I have no idea. I was lost.
Well, if I may say one word to our viewers, Costco. Costco. It's much cheaper in Costco. There's one reason to go to Costco there. I'm a big fan of Costco. It's much cheaper, Lurpak. And even a few years ago when things were at the toughest it's been for me, really, everything else was going out of our shopping baskets, whatever. The one thing that stayed was Lurpak.
And Blue Tack, of course.
Blue Tack,
well, now I get as much as long as I mention it every show, they send me as much as I want.
Well, since we're hoping to gain benefit from our commercial endorsements, I have to say that Sainsbury's have cut me a deal on their butter, which is perfectly adequate, if not quite as nice as Lurpak.
Other butters, of course, are Wednesday's Daily Mail tells us why we have that little cry every time we have to fill up the car, Josh.
It's quite an interesting article in the Daily Mail. I knew some of it, but essentially the whole thing is breaks down the costs of petrol and diesel and why things are as expensive as they are. Now, the big complaint, of course, is that the petrol stations are not passing on these savings. So this kind of breaks that down. If you want to save yourself a big old 20-page article, it seems like, yes, they are ripping us off a little bit. But let's see how they get there. First of all, the price of petrol is about crude oil. That's going to fix it at the moment. Obviously, that's gone up a lot because what's happening in Russia. And it's not that the UK is directly affected as much. That we only, I think, get 7% from Russia. But the point is, it's pushing up all the prices around the rest of the world.
It's a global price.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Internationally set price.
Yeah, and then you've got this environmentally friendly stuff that goes in E10 and E5.
Yep.
Supposedly that's pushing up because, of course, that is also related. It's biofuel, so that's being pushed up. And then you have taxation. That is the big thing. Of course, it was dropped 5p a month or so ago, but then that seems to have made no difference because petrol at the moment is the highest it's ever been, just under £2 essentially. And then finally, you've got Russian oil to see whether, if they do decide to take the war, how much longer it's going to go, or if Russia decides to mess even further with the world economy and they cut back on whatever production they are putting out there, that could just send things spiralling.
One of the sick things is that Russia is profiting enormously from the world oil price at the moment. I believe I read the other day that they have this year so far earned I think it's about 30% more than they earned through petrochemical sales.
$1 billion a day. Or
more than they
like
did last year, and whilst producing less because of obviously the boycotts. So obscenely, they are massively profiting from the international crisis created by their own invasion.
But 5 weeks of the declining wholesale prices, that's what people have been going, like RAC and these companies going, wait a minute, it's kind of been going down, why, or it has been going down steadily. Why are they, and they've worked it out, and they're basically saying that they haven't been passing this on. And at the end of the day, it should be about £1.83, and it's still £1.90. So
what gets me at the end of all those things that you just listed, that slap price on top of petrol, then you go and fill the tank, you go in there, and the little chip and pin thing says, "Do you want to give 25p to charity?"
25p.
What, mate? I think I've already been fleeced enough. After the break, is Edinburgh Fringe too pricey? Has the Antiques Roadshow gone woke? And what are the top UK baby names? Ooh, exciting. We'll have all the answers coming up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Stephen Allen, joined by Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse, unless any of them have resigned during the break. We'll check in a second. Wednesday's Times, does the BBC have Antiques Roadshow trying to avoid history, Roger?
Wow. This is where it gets controversial. In a briefing document soliciting pitches from producers, the corporation said the high-profile nature of Antiques Roadshow means that it is often under a great deal of public scrutiny as to how it handles sensitive areas such as colonial history. We are looking for experience in managing compliance issues and reputational risk. This is a bit like the National Trust trying to decolonise the visiting stately homes experience. It seems a little bit irrelevant. I mean, you can't delve into British history much without hitting upon colonisation and empire. Of course you can't. And the fact is, the Antiques Roadshow is not, and this is where I might just get into a little bit of trouble, a black programme. Is it really? I mean, black people don't do antiques. It's a cultural thing. It's a frighteningly white obsession. I don't know entirely what the reasons are. It's like Glastonbury. Black people don't do Glastonbury. They've got more big in sense.
Some do. I would say exclusively interested in that. But yeah, that'll probably get you in trouble.
Yeah. Good luck with that, yeah.
But I don't really understand how. I mean, I guess they can mention things as they come up. But yeah, this phrase, managing compliance issues and reputational risk of colonial history, I'm wondering if it means that someone sort of brings in a painting of Edward Colson and then they kind of throw it in the sea. if that's what they're working for. But they also, I love the way that the BBC are just the best for the way that they produce these documents and their phrasing.
That phrasing is beautiful, isn't it?
They want someone to reach outside the linear transmission, i.e. use of social platforms. Well, that's the only example. I mean, they're not using smoke signals here. It's that show, WIA or whatever. It's the people, their job is just to come up with these ridiculous, obfuscating words and phrasing where just say, like, yeah, you just want to go viral, mate.
That's what it is.
Mate,
but there are
mate's the important part.
People within the BBC who can't be fired because they've got an amazing system. If your staff there, you just can't be fired. It's brilliant. But then you can also get away with doing no work if you spend like a full, maybe that's half a day's work there, isn't it? Coming up with that sentence. You just say we want to go viral. You've got to do some actual work. You work on that. All of a sudden,
well, it could be how their creativity is sort of peaked or whatever. But it is interesting to know that each episode of Antiques Roadshow costs 127,000 people.
I noticed that. A lot of money, isn't it? A lot of money. Although in terms of TV production, is that so much? Probably not.
But it really devalues the worth of the thing that someone brings on. They go like, oh, look at this item that's been in your family for generations and it's worth 10 grand, which is a small fraction of what all this costs.
You would see whooping and hollering and celebration if someone got something valued at 10 grand. And it turns out Fiona Bruce is on more than that every episode.
Wednesday's Mirror is the most pointless annual survey out again. It's the most popular baby names. Tell us which one it is, Josh.
Ooh.
Yes, well, Olivia has been knocked off the top spot. Olivia's been there since 2015. It is now Lily for girls and boys. I guess now, probably in another year, this will be the last time they do the girls and boys list. It'll be the non-gender specific names or whatever. Lily is the middle name of my daughter, so I feel like I was ahead of the curve a little bit, a few years ahead there. Arya and Ivy have made it into the top 10. Arya, number 10, I think that's Arya Stark, and Ivy from the classic 90s film Poison Ivy, sort of soft. I don't know if you remember that film. Anyway, possibly. I don't know if that's those. Now, Mohammed...
That'll be it.
Yeah, Mohammed and Noah are number 1 and 2, eternally fighting it out, the Abrahamic religions. And but it's interesting that every year this article comes out, but what I hadn't really factored in is how popular culture, the impact it does have on these things. And in one particular way is that negatively, so Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, Amber's now been knocked out of the top 100. Johnny has gone way down as well. Wagatha Christie trial. There are no Wagathas this year.
That's interesting.
But also this amazed me. There's no Wayne. There's no one in this country born in the last 6 months has been called Wayne.
Wow.
That seems because for me when I was growing up, it's like everybody was Wayne. So there are things like that which I think is really interesting. Zion has actually come into number 95, and that's the middle name of my youngest son. So again, ahead of the curve. And the one that we really want to know is Joshua. Is number 34. Now, it doesn't say whether it's gone up or down. I've been on television now for about 6 months, so I can't see how it's not gone up from 90-ish.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed to note that Roger's not listed at all, because it turns out is an old geezer's name, and I had no concept of that. During lockdown, I started gardening for old ladies for a bit of cash, and all the old ladies I worked for, charmingly, were called Anne and Liz. And I'd never previously thought of Anne and Liz as being old lady names, but they are. They've been chased out of these lists, and now they're old lady names.
It used to be Ethels, but now we're all old enough that Ethels are probably coming back in.
Ethels are gone. Maybe Rose, for instance. Rose would have been something our grandmothers were called, but now perhaps it's coming in. I don't know. A little while ago, I think Victorian girls' names were fashionable. Lily, of course, is a Victorian girl's name.
That's it. But my kids are called ridiculous names, which I love.
Well,
Mordecai. No one, they ain't in the top 100. Mordecai.
I thought, because you always think you're not part of the zeitgeist, don't you? You always think you're ahead or different. But then it turns out, years later, you're part of the zeitgeist. My daughter's called Emilia, spelt in the Eastern European way. But I noticed that's crept into the top 50.
They copied you. They saw that and thought, I'll have a slice of that. You give it a couple of weeks, Elon Musk kid will suddenly... There'll be loads of ones that look like Teletext's gone wrong. Josh, can we have all the names of your kids?
Yes, Mordecai is the eldest. Then there is, I have to actually remember them quickly, Art, who's named after Artie Shaw, famous clarinetist. Then there's Woodrow, after Woody Allen. Bet, after Bette Midler. And Zero, after Zero Mostel.
Oh, I thought you were going to say after the accounting software, but I guess you spell it the other way.
They're all Jewish entertainers, essentially.
Sounds like a Harry Potter spell.
There we are. None of them like Harry Potter. Weirdly.
Oh, really?
No, strangely.
My daughter didn't like him either.
I feel that might be a separate issue that is not the story we're dealing with. Wednesday's Independent. Will J.K. Rowling... Oh, so it turns out we are dealing...
What a segue that turned out
story.
to be.
What professionals we are.
Will J.K. be helping Macy Gray? I guess she'll try, Roger. It's the only song I could think of.
I don't know any Macy Gray songs, so that frankly was lost on me. But well done for your youth culture reference there. J.K. Rowling. How many decades ago was Macy Gray top of the... I mean, honestly,
I think it was 990s or something. They're great songs, great album. She's a great singer.
Well, I do. She's got a wonderful voice. You're absolutely right.
Well, anyway. Great songs. Can you name another one that's not I Try?
No.
I Try really hard.
The extended version.
I'm talking trouble, it's clear. Here.
Yes, she did have a great voice. Shut your eyes and she's in the room. J.K. Rowling says that she'll be buying Macy Gray's entire back catalogue following the singer's, in inverted commas, transphobic comments. Rowling has repeatedly been criticised and accused of transphobia for her past comments about transgender people. J.K. Rowling has said that she'll be purchasing Macy Gray's entire back catalogue. I thought it would be like Sony buying Michael Jackson's back catalogue, but I think she just means like a few CDs.
Well, I think the thing is, she's loaded. Yes. I don't understand why she doesn't just join a streaming service. That, like, you can get to Apple at the moment are doing like a 3 for 1 month deal or something. I'm just saying, I don't want to tell J.K. Rowling how to spend her money, but it is interesting here, as you said, in inverted commas, transphobic comments, because she didn't make transphobic comments. She basically, she said on a TV, on this other channel, I can't remember which one it was, with this presenter.
Some trash.
Some guy, I don't know who, some talky thing, whatever it is.
Never heard of
it. Yeah, imitators. Anyway, the point is, Macy Gray, you're always welcome on here. And she said that basically you can't just like chop off some bits or... that's not going to make you a woman. Like whatever you call yourself, being a woman is more deeper than that. Is more integral. Going up as a young girl, it's more it's a lived experience thing as well. So she basically said truth, but of course that's for trans rights activists. The truth, that's what they would call transphobic. So if you're saying that biological sex is binary, they would say that's transphobic. If you're saying that only biological men should compete in women's sports because that's fair, then that's transphobic. If you think that biological men self-IDing into rapists, self-IDing into women's prisons is wrong, then guess what? You're transphobic, according to trans rights activists. So it's become a totally meaningless term. Macy Gray, respect to her, speaking the truth. It's a big deal. Of course, she's had a lot of flack from it because J.K. Rowling, who's said only very similar things, death threats, rape threats. And yesterday, another person, Bette Midler, came out, who I named my daughter after, and Bette Midler basically came out and said, stop erasing names of women, like stop erasing the name woman and mother. And that's a massive deal because she's such a big gay icon. Mm-hmm. So to try and cancel her is going to be very interesting. Already Macy Gray, though, she hasn't backtracked, but she put out a tweet about an hour ago saying that she's been sort of misinterpreted. But they've been getting attacked, like, all day.
Understandable to backtrack when you see the hostility, the fury that comments like that engender. Also, I have to observe, it's a generational thing, isn't it? You look at J.K. Rowling, Bette Midler, and indeed Macy Gray. They're of our generation, dare I say. You talk to millennials about this, and they have a different angle entirely, and I really can't quite get my head around it.
Well, because they've been raised learning some anti-science claptrap in schools by these companies.
It's also worth remembering, my favourite fact about millennials is that now they're in their 40s. We always use the word millennials to mean young, but yeah, they're 41, I think, is the oldest.
Generation QX or whatever it's called.
Many will be into Greek letters. Call it Omicron, that'll confuse people. Wednesday's Daily Mail and the sitcom Friends have found something else to say sorry for, Josh.
Yeah, so Friends, they had a trans character in it, which was played by a trans woman that was actually played by a woman who was Kathleen Turner, which was really funny because she has a very deep voice, and it was like this kind of running joke. But he would refer to her as his father, and then now one of the creators of Friends is saying that she's sorry because that was like misgendering or using the wrong pronouns or whatever. But for that character, Chandler Bing, that was his father. You know what I mean? So that doesn't change because someone then changes sex or changes their gender identity or whatever.
What's intriguing about this, I think, is that no comedy, no references escape their times. You see all sorts of references which today wouldn't be acceptable in comedies from a previous generation, a previous era. That's more or less what's happening here. But what's frightening, I think, is that you get the producers of these products, these comedies in this instance, recanting almost in a religious way, you know, like it's a necessity, like it's a religious conversion. I can't really believe that they think what they produced was evil and profoundly wrong. I don't really believe that what they were doing at the time was indeed transphobic, and yet now they're keen to acknowledge that it was.
This ideology didn't exist 20 years ago when this was made, so it's absolutely ridiculous to be apologising for it after the fact, for something that's only been created since
to Roger's point about how you always see comedy change, you give it enough decades and comedy changes, and we all hit an age where we want comedy to stay exactly as it is, but it'll continue to change. But to look back on previous work and say, oh, I wouldn't have written it like that now, is perfectly fine to say, but I guarantee you a newspaper would take that and go, they've really apologised.
Yes,
Now, I'm
that's
not
a really
now,
good
the
point.
Friends example is, I mean, I think that apology is misplaced and isn't what I'm saying, but what's the name of the Scottish sketch show that the BBC edited bits out of?
Oh, yeah.
No, absolutely, I can't remember which one it was, but they took some bits out, and the writers of it said, oh, yeah, I wouldn't do that sketch again now. And we could all move on with our lives if we hadn't have taken that story and made it some big issue of cancellation.
John Cleese, of course, made remarks about 40 Towers, about the Major's character and his use of pejorative racial slang. It was of its time. It was funny.
Yeah. Well, that's another one that will roll on and on. We'll talk about it. Wednesday's Metro. We might have to be short on this, which is going to be interesting. It's an issue that's not close to our hearts. It's nearer to our knees. Roger, give us the details.
Oh, here we go. Oh, good grief. It's the bit of smut at the end.
Yep.
I've been left with the bit of smut at the end.
The big end.
Wait for it.
Language, Timothy.
Is your penis too big? Said no one ever. New TV show is looking for men that are, in inverted commas, too large to love.
Not call me.
This is tawdry stuff, isn't it? The course of true love never did run smooth, while those wise words from William Shakespeare still run.
Because I love how they're trying to make it classy.
That's right.
We've only got like 15 seconds on this. So
OK, just give them the website and so people can call in.
Sadly, we can't give you those details. So thank you very much to my guests, Josh Howie and Roger Monkhouse, with those details. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow for more Headliners.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no